Thanks for joining us on this for this session. This is the part of each of our tracks where part of what we're trying to do is tap into the Ballard Center's desire to develop the faith and skills to solve social problems. And so many of you in this room may remember in the fall of 2024, September and October, within 10 days, there were two major hurricanes, Helene and Milton. They made landfall back-to-back in the southeast U.S. The pictures and the numbers that we might have seen were that over 20,000 Latter-day Saints and thousands of other volunteers, faith-based and not, worked during that time to help thousands of impacted families. Well, we have with us here Elder Quinn Millington, who serves as an Area 70 in the North American Southeast area for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where he has led the church's regional disaster response efforts. That's formerly now, right?
That's correct.
Your role's changed, okay.
Yeah.
As the former head of the area's disaster response committee, he coordinated large-scale relief operations across hurricane-prone states, mobilizing thousands of these volunteers, assisting communities with debris removal, home repairs, and recovery. He helped the church and faith-based organizations in general to play a central role in responses to these major storms, ensuring that aid was delivered quickly, safely, and compassionately. We became aware of Elder Millington because of a wonderful podcast that he did that was titled Christ-Centered Response to Disasters, to Disaster Relief. So we've invited him here today to talk a bit about what the behind-the-scenes work of a faith-led response to disaster really looks like. So I'm going to turn the time over to him for a while to sort of set the context of that, and then we'll do some Q&A if you don't mind.
That sounds great. Jill,
Okay.
Thank you. Just one quick correction. I'm in the southeast. The northeast has some problems. Similar.
Southeast has more.
Southeast, we're just known, if you live in the southeast, you have a chainsaw, you have a skid steer, and that's just how life goes. You are accustomed to keeping everything oiled up and greased up and gassed up because it might happen today. And you're ready to go anytime something should happen. But I wanted to just kind of set the stage for you. I sometimes get asked this question, what is the greatest miracle? And let me just start by saying I've sat here last night, I've sat here today, and I am looking at the miracle. You are a miracle. Every time that we have this conversation, I find that we can find all kinds of miracles, and we may have a chance to talk about a couple of those, but I didn't really want to get too far into this without acknowledging first the miracles that are sitting here and all of the work that you're doing. Somewhere in there is a love of your fellow man and a desire that's rooted in something. And for us, we often, this morning I had my slides ready, and this morning I woke up and I said, I don't like them. And so I changed everything. And many thanks to the audiovisual folks here who helped clean these up, and they look very nice now. But I stole a couple things. I guess if I'm acknowledging it, it's not plagiarism, is it?
No.
Okay. These came off the website for the Ballard Center. And I wanted to just highlight a couple of things that are noted on there. God's children develop the faith and skills. And I thought that matters. Here are some additional things that are highlighted, and I wanted to just pull those out there. Christ-led, humility, everyone matters, stewardship, creativity. I wanted to pull those things out and make a point of connecting that to an underlying idea of faith in this motivating factor that we tap into as we serve our fellow man. I went to the Beatitudes in Matthew 5. As I was thinking about this, Jill, I wanted to know, I thought to myself, so what does that look like? On the backside, what was Jesus trying to teach? And I thought, one of the best places we can probably find that is in Matthew 5. And you'll notice in Matthew 6, the next thing he does is come out and say, let your light shine. So the invitation is, do this, be this. And then in the next chapter, he says, let your light shine. We don't want to bottle that up. But if you think about all of these things, these items that I've listed here in the Beatitudes, it is rooted in faith. And that faith leads us to be a different creature. And I highlighted 2 Corinthians 5:17 because that's one of the scriptures that I really like. And you just interrupt here. If you have a thought, I want you to jump in because I'm kind of on a little roll here.
You
Don't
are on a
hesitate
roll.
because my kids have never bothered to hesitate. If I'm on a roll, they'll put their hand up and say, Dad.
Okay.
So you can say Dad.
Dad. Got it. Got it.
And it will be just fine.
Okay.
But I went to Corinthians and wanted to make this connection between this idea that when we act in faith, and Neil Maxwell, some of you will know him. Those of you who are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints will recognize the name Neil Maxwell. He was a member of the Quorum of the 12 many years ago. And I love what he said. Faith and hope, this connection. You sometimes look at faith and hope, and I would ask myself sometimes, what's the connection between faith and hope? And you'll know this was Neil Maxwell because when I say this, you'll know clearly this was a Maxwellism. Hope is a larger circumference than faith. So you ask yourself, well, what is it that I can do? I can be a peacemaker. I can be humble. And all of those things that we listed in the Beatitudes are things that we can do as we are becoming like Christ. Those are the things that we do. And we do it because we have this hope to be more Christ-like. And in an effort to be more Christ-like, the natural sequence in that is that we begin to look for ways that we can serve our fellow man. And so I thought about this and I said, you know, and you're familiar with this, in James chapter 2, we have 2 verse 1s up there, but that's okay. You'll see it's verse 1 and verse 2, and actually it's 1 and 3. I skipped 2. But in verse 3, you'll say, for as the body without the spirit is dead, so is faith without works dead. To become a peacemaker requires an effort. And to be one who is going to minister in love and kindness because one is becoming a different creature requires effort. We exercise that, we go through that activity with the hope that we become a better person. We become that new creature. We become more like Jesus Christ. That's our effort and that's our goal. And then when you look at this, I'm going to give you 2 examples. Jesus works with us. Just think about that for a minute. And I pulled 2 quick examples, and we could find more. But the first one I thought of was in John 11, when Jesus goes to raise Lazarus. And he intentionally waited 4 days because the tradition was that the spirit would stick around. And he wanted the Jews to know for sure, this has to be a miracle. I'm doing something unexpected here because it's past the time that you would expect anything miraculous to happen. He's not coming back to life. And he gets to the tomb and he says, move the stone. That's something that his followers could do. But what they couldn't do is raise Lazarus. He asks us to do the part that we can do, and then we see these incredible miracles begin to occur when we've done our part. We do our part with this hope that something bigger than us comes to life. And that's what happens. The another example is the tribute. And I love this one. Peter kind of gets cornered by the taxpayers, and they say, are you going to pay tribute? And I imagine that Peter was probably a little bit nervous, and he said, yeah, we'll pay tribute. And then he gets back. Jesus already knows what's happened. And he says, Peter, he teaches him a lesson and asks him a question about tribute. And then he says, well, it's going to be taken care of. Go catch this fish, open its mouth, and you'll find a coin. Peter had to go do something. But the Lord made the miracle happen. So as we act in faith, the miracle begins to happen. Does that make sense? All in favor? Okay, they're still with us, Jill.
I know.
All right, and I just wanted to set the stage on that and bring that up just a little bit. And then the 2 great commandments you're familiar with. Everybody knows this. You find this in Matthew 22. First, love God, and second, love your fellow man. Go back to this idea of faith again, and you say to yourself, what is it that I'm doing with the hope of becoming more like Jesus Christ? The natural outcome of that is we're loving God, and then we serve our fellow man. It's a beautiful synergy that comes together. And sitting here with you, I see all of you doing this very thing. It is a miracle. That in itself is an absolute miracle. All right, Jill, there's a couple of thoughts that I had this morning, and I just thought I would share that with everybody as we got started.
Yeah. Well, and you had referred once to something that I think you had learned from a Baptist preacher, friend of yours, that talked about the importance of getting their faith dirty. This is a great context for that, but I wanted to see if you could show us some pictures, at least, of what that has looked like as you have worked with members of the church and outside of that, what that really looked like, particularly during this stretch.
I was thinking about this friend while I was watching last night, and we saw some pictures from Nepal last night, and he does a lot of work in Nepal, and he's a Baptist minister who says, I got kicked out of the club. And there's a long story behind that, but his whole thought is it's not enough to just have faith and go to church. He said, let's go get our faith dirty. And he does a lot of work in Nepal. Up here, this was in Hurricane Ida, and I just grabbed a few slides, and this was kind of a fun one. And there was this little community in Jean Lafitte, which is south of New Orleans, and I got a phone call. It was interesting how this came together. All I got was an email, and the email was forwarded to me from the area presidency, and it started with Elder Holland, Jeffrey Holland, forwarded it to the area president, forwarded it to me. That's it. That's all I got with this email forwarded. And it was basically, we need help. I had no idea what I was going to walk into, so I got in the car and drove to Jean Lafitte and just started asking questions. And you'll see just some of these pictures, as I'll click through them really quickly, of some of the problems that were existing there. And when I got down there, I ran into Father Luke. And there's Father Luke right there, who was the priest in St. Anthony's Catholic Church right there in Jean Lafitte. And he's showing me on his, you'll see right there, I'll show you on this screen right there, he's got his finger, and he's showing me where the water level was. And you can't really see it on that slide, but on this one, if you look carefully, you can see that the watermark across the church is right there. And there's the top of a truck. It gives you the idea of how much water there was in this community, and they were absolutely devastated. And he said, we're struggling to get out of this. Over the weekend that I was down there with him, we saw one group after another show up with their gloves and their boots and muscles, and they went to work. And you'll see in the background, tents came up, and you'll see food that began to arrive. And we cleaned out their fellowship hall, and you can see us moving in some of the stuff in the back end. Well, before long, we had a ton of other faith-based groups with us. And nobody was worried about anything other than what do we do to help? And that was it. And so we could click through this. We had a lot of prayers together, and it was just a beautiful experience for us to share. I think, and I have another good friend who's also a Baptist minister, and he said the most important thing that we can do is figure out how we can work together. We all serve the same master. Let's figure out how we can be more effective at doing just that.
I love that. And want to get to that in a minute, where we talk a little bit about that opportunity to counsel with one another in order to make our work most effective. I wonder, though, first, a lot of times what we will see and hear from the press after one of these really intense disasters is numbers, both numbers of the impact and also the volunteers, and see pictures. We saw one actually in your slide set of yellow shirts, just armies of yellow shirts around. And sometimes that's where our understanding of how this really works ends, is just where like a lot of people show up and they are wearing matching t-shirts and then work gets done. I wonder, tongue-in-cheek, I think in the disaster response world, there is a term called second wave disaster, which is actually when after a disaster, the very well-intentioned people and the things, the stuff, start showing up, and there's literally no system or place for them to land. So I wonder if you can illuminate for us a little bit about what a really effective faith-based response looks like systemically, and how that maybe is an advantage.
We have, in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, there's a very well-defined organizational structure. We depend heavily on the individuals in the community to give us feedback. And they have a lot of experience. They've been through a lot of storms, and many 35 or 40 years ago, it wasn't as effective as it is now, but today, they understand what they need to look for and how to give us data. And we track a lot of the data. I was excited to see all of the data input systems that are being developed here as I've been watching. And
When you say we too, what does that, who's tracking that data?
Well, that's a great question. I say we because as part of our disaster response team, we have an individual who is a meteorologist. And so he is constantly giving us data so that we know where the storm is, the track of the storm. And, you know, with the models and stuff improving, and many of you know this a lot better than I do, but he's telling us now, he said, within 48 hours, I can tell you where that storm's going to be and feel very confident about where that storm is going to be. What that does then is allow our emergency response team to be able to pre-position responses, including truckloads of goods and commodities that we know we're going to need to respond to that emergency and to offer some relief. So it might be, we may be aware that somebody's going to need diapers and formula. That'll be on a truck headed there well in advance. We also know that we're going to need the basic cleanup items. That's pre-positioned and ready to go. And we can respond very, very quickly to that because we've got data on the front end that tells us this is where it's going to be. We know the path it's going to take, and we can expect rainfall totals. We kind of have this idea of what to expect as we go into it. In terms of the organization itself, we have stake presidents that are telling us this is where the need is going to be in our stake. And it's an incredible thing where we're able to receive this input, and then on the periphery, in the areas that are not impacted, very, very quickly. Everybody knows the storm is coming. And in the southeast, I would get these phone calls and emails, are we going? Are we going? And I'm like, wait a minute, the storm is still a week out. We're not quite sure which path it's going to take. But yes, you're going to end up getting called if you don't get hit. And so we would watch it very carefully, but within 48 hours, we knew what was going to happen. And we would have a conference call, and we would choose stakes that were usually within 100 miles of the impact area, and we would say, have you got your high-efficiency teams ready to go? And these are teams that we know are completely self-sufficient. They need nothing. They can handle everything from food and supplies and fuel, camping, everything. We know they can handle it independently. That's the first line on week 0. They're there. And it's very well organized. They roll into a stake. The stake president says, I know we need help in this area, and these are the individuals that we know need help. And they don't need any additional direction than that. They just go. I think it's important, and the thought that just came to my mind is this, and I want to share this thought very quickly. As time goes by, we gather more data, we include more people, and during Hurricane Helene, we had a total of 25,000 volunteers, 325,000 man-hours were contributed in that time frame. Serving between 6,000 and 8,000 homes is what we influenced. And you think about the efforts that each of you were doing, and the efforts of all of these resources coming together with truckloads of supplies and thousands of individuals, and all of that is coming together to serve one. Maybe it's one person, maybe it's one home, maybe it's one family, but that whole thing is coming together to minister to one. And it is an absolutely beautiful thing to see. And people say, how does this work? And we say, well, it's rooted in faith. And so the organizational structure of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is such that I'm able to send a message to the other Area 70s and say, here's what we need from your stakes. And within hours, we have an answer. We know exactly how many people are going. We have a team that is responsible for setting up the camping, a team that's responsible for setting up what we call an operations center, where people can pick up work orders and all of the supplies that they need. We have teams that are doing data analysis, and the stake president of the stake that's receiving the help, his job is to minister. He's worried. And we say, you don't worry about anything. We'll handle everything. You go minister. Tell us what you need. We're here to help. And they go to the community, and the community tells us what they need, and we just jump in and go to work. And you think about how that happens, and how do you do that? Faith. We love God. We love our fellow man. And we're going to go because of those two abiding principles. Now, that was a lot of answer for a simple question about the organizational structure, but I kind of wanted to connect it back to faith again before I was done. Is that okay?
That's all right.
I got a little carried away.
You're doing great.
I looked over here to see if my wife told me the cutoff sign. I didn't get it, so I figured I was okay.
No, we're getting all kinds of thumbs up. I'm grateful for that, because I think sometimes we use the word faith and that's perceived as finger crossing that things will work out. And in this case, faith actually is a process of creation that's really using what you're talking about as an area overview, right, that communicates to a stake or a regional. Mm-hmm. And that regional consists of real close connections to almost neighborhood level precincts. And within those neighborhoods, there's people identified all the way to an individual, and making sure that an individual and their home and their family is doing well.
It really is. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
We know that all of these resources are sitting here. Where are the ones that need the help? And our job is to get them connected.
Yeah.
We connect all of these resources to one and make sure that their needs are met.
Great. So that's sort of the story behind a 20,000 plus volunteer response, how you got those volunteers and then how you organize those volunteers to be of most impact.
That's correct.
Yeah. Let's talk a minute. I would love to spend a little bit of time on what in the Ballard Center we call faith skills. So often these are characteristics of a faith-based person, but we talk about either the characteristic or the practice of being able to put your faith to work. One that I'd like to talk about, again, is I think a misconception, which is that when volunteers show up, this can be, service in general can be unskilled, hoping for the best, throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks type of effort. And so service, though, in a faith skill sort of perspective, is actually a form of sacrifice, right? It's sacrifice of people's time and sometimes their skills that they're professionally trained in, that they are offering in this time of need. So because it's a sacrifice, that is what we would say in faith language is that sort of gives something it makes something sacred. So instead of sort of a rough and tumble crowd of unskilled volunteers showing up, people coming to serve and sacrifice can elevate this to actually a sacred experience. I wonder if you've got any insight or stories that you could share with us about sacrifice.
Well, not without being emotional.
Yeah, well, stop then, Dad. I'm just kidding. We love that. We love that.
I was communicating earlier today, and faith-based skills, they look very different. A faith-based skill can be as unique as the individual. And I think that's important to remember. I think if any of you are thinking to yourself, I'm not sure that I have a faith-based skill, I would invite you to go to the Book of Mormon and reference Moroni chapter 10, verse 25, which says, if you go about doing good, it is under the influence of the Holy Spirit. That alone tells me that anytime any of us are doing anything good, it was under the influence of the Holy Ghost, the third member of the Godhead. And so any individual that is trying to do something, that skill might look very different from one individual to the next. I hope, if anything, you leave with this idea that I can do good and my skill set is sufficient. And so we've got individuals who are incredible at running chainsaws. And I was in a backyard years ago working with a tree, and the tree was massive. Now, I was the stake president in the Montgomery, Alabama stake. We had a branch that was way out in the country, the Magnolia branch. All of them work in the timber industry. All of them work in the timber industry. And I would go out there as a stake president, and they would struggle to read a passage in the scriptures. I'd say, could you read this? And it was broken and halted and difficult. And I was judgmental initially. I was judgmental. And then we went to clean up. And we were trying to tackle this yard and the trees, and it was debris, and it was difficult. I had a skid steer, and somebody says, where are the guys from Magnolia? We need their help. And they tracked them down, and they came rolling in these big trucks. And we were working with our chainsaws. They got out with their chainsaws. Okay, timber industry. And they walked up and they kind of surveyed the yard. We'd been out there all morning. 30 minutes later, it was over. I never looked at them the same again. Never looked at them the same again. It didn't matter that they couldn't read like I read or have the education that I have. What mattered is they knew how to employ a faith skill in a way that I didn't. Does that make sense? And at the same time, you flip that. Let me just give you a different version of what a faith skill would look like. You got a welfare and self-reliance manager. Any welfare and self-reliance managers here by chance? Okay. So we have a welfare and self-reliance manager responsible for loading up a truck that's going to be distributed to Asheville, North Carolina. And diapers and formula were not on the list. It was water and food boxes, these other commodities. And the whole time he's loading the truck, he kept thinking, they need diapers and formula. They need diapers and formula. It wasn't on the list. And at the last minute, he said, stop. We've got to put diapers and formula on this load. And so they said, well, wait a minute. And he said, figure it out. We got to get diapers and formula on the load. And he was insistent. The truck gets to Asheville, North Carolina, and they get a phone call. We have no diapers and formula. There's a place in Asheville, and they said, we are absolutely desperate. We have nothing. No diapers, no formula. How quickly can you get it here? Well, it's here. That's a completely different faith skill. Do you see the difference there? But both of them, developed over time, are incredibly powerful. And that's why I say that anybody doing good, and we have a welfare and self-reliance manager responding to a spiritual prompting with such force that he said, stop everything. This is wrong. Let's fix this. And took it upon himself to make a significant change with tremendous benefit. And you've got the individuals who don't have the education that maybe you and I do, able to clear a yard faster than anything I've ever seen in my life. Skill sets are varied. We got the little sign back there that says we have to stop now.
I know I'm going to push for one more question.
Okay.
All right? And we could, just hearing you, I wish I could talk to you for another half an hour at least about faith skills like fasting and prayer and fast offerings and humility and counsels. I had mentioned, the church's emphasis on counsels is something that we're paying a lot of attention to. But I wonder if we could just close out with, you started with your sort of assertion that this crowd gathering here today is a miracle. Some people will look at some of the miracles you've described with disaster response. Trees not falling on certain houses, certain people being in certain places with certain skills. And you're calling that a miracle. And some people would call that good fortune or good luck. I wonder how you define a miracle, and then if you could just kind of close out with that.
Miracles are all around us. As you read through the scriptures, what you discover is that miracles are available to those who have eyes to see. Matthew 13, I think, is a great example of the Lord teaching us what it looks like to see with spiritual eyes. So when we look at spiritual eyes, and your example of trees is very good. I cannot tell you how amazed I am every time I walk into a disaster area to discover these massive trees. And we know which way the wind was blowing. The wind's going this way, and the tree fell this way. Now, how in the world did that happen? Had it gone the other way, it would have crushed the house and everyone in it. It was a miracle. And so the trees fell away from the house. We see trees that should have crushed a house fall over and not crush a house. Those are all incredible miracles that we see. Now, I want to go back to this counseling idea for just a minute. And this is a form of a counsel, as we're learning from each other here. This idea of counseling, that none of us have the absolute answer, but under the influence of the Lord, as we come together seeking inspiration on how better to serve his children, we find better solutions. And that's the benefit of a counsel. I just had to throw that in there.
Nice.
Before we got away from this.
Yeah. Well, we thank you so much for being here today and to shine this light, particularly on what people of faith, what organizations that are faith-informed and faith-filled, how they can engage in this conversation more effectively. We're grateful for the light that you've been able to shine on that through your experiences and your work with others. So appreciate you, Elder Millington. Thanks.
Thank you.